So today I'm going to be discussing a study of bioluminescent plankton, and the title is Plants That Glow. So I'm going to do a little introduction of bioluminescence. The definition that was given in my article from National Geographic was the light produced by a chemical reaction within a living organism. Bioluminescence is related to chemiluminescence in the sense that chemiluminescence is referring to the actual reaction between two chemicals, whereas the bioluminescence is with the chemical reaction within a living organism itself. Bioluminescence is not to be confused with fluorescence, which is light being absorbed and reflected by other organisms, as opposed to a chemical reaction that occurs within an organism. So now I'm going to introduce dinoflagellates, which are the bioluminescent plankton that I'm going to specifically be focusing on. The most common type of bioluminescent dinoflagellates are plankton, and the specific one that I'm citing is the Noctiluca scintillans, and that's what it looks like right there under a microscope. And plankton are not necessarily defined into an animal or plant category because they have plant-like structures, and they have chlorophyll, and they photosynthesize. So, but they also cannot be defined as animals because they can be defined as animals as well because they are living, breathing organisms. These specific types of bioluminescent plankton emit pinkish, reddish, or greenish color in the ocean, and they do not fluctuate in the way that they glow. They remain glowing throughout the evening, which is when you can see it. So what specifically makes bioluminescent organisms glow? It's a reaction caused by two chemicals which are present in most bioluminescent organisms, which is luciferin and luciferase. So luciferin is a substrate, and it's the chemical that produces light. And then luciferase is an enzyme that interacts with the substrate and affects the rate of reaction. So in some organisms, the luciferase would create like an ebbing, flowing, pulsating glow, and in specifically dinoflagellates, it's just a constant glow. Some organisms, not dinoflagellates, however, absorb their glow through food, which they'll just eat bioluminescent plankton like jellyfish, and then they'll glow through having absorbed those nutrients. And then the luciferase, which is the enzyme within bioluminescent organisms, is related to the green chemical chlorophyll, which is also found in plants. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the environment, ecosystem, and adaptations of bioluminescent organisms. And so typically they're found in warm lagoons that have a narrow opening to the ocean so that they can come from the ocean into the lagoon, but that they can't escape that easily. They like to cluster. Also, I found in reading articles that their ecosystems tend to be pretty rare, and one was recently found in 2010 in Puerto Rico. They create the appearance of milky seas, as like we can kind of see right here in this picture, where it's just a constant glow as opposed to like a pulsating. So it kind of just looks milky and consistent throughout the ocean. What else? Bioluminescent plankton can form symbiotic relationships with whales and sharks, in the sense that whales and sharks don't necessarily feed on them, but what they'll do is cluster around the plankton when they are glowing in order to get them to attract fish and other organisms that whales and sharks might want to eat. The defense mechanism of bioluminescence in plankton is essentially the constant glowing warns their main predator, which is copepod grazers, because they're thrown off by the glowing and they're warned against eating them, essentially. Some things that bioluminescent plankton tend to contribute to their ecosystem is they're considered marine primary producers, so they can contribute to reef building corals, which is important for the ecosystem. It creates a lot of different biodiversity within marine wildlife, and a way that they can potentially harm their ecosystem is creating harmful algal blooms, which is what we learned about in class as well, and red tides, which we can kind of see right here. Some bioluminescent plankton will give off toxins that will create like a red tide, and it can kill off fish and shells and shellfish and all kinds of other organisms. Well, that's awkward. Okay, so my case study, so human studies on bioluminescence is what I'm basically going to talk about as far as relatability to science today and how bioluminescence benefits science. In addition to how it's used in plankton themselves, the reaction within bioluminescent molecules can aid in medical advancement. So from the Smithsonian article that I used, light can be used from photosynthesizers within bioluminescent plankton to destruct cancer cells from within. Essentially, they basically concentrate the sources of light through photosynthesizers, and it can implode the cancer cells from the inside out. And then the specific type of bioluminescent plankton that I talked about earlier, the Noctilla centillions, contain the bioluminescent enzyme and substrate that allows for the medical advancements. So the harvesting of, or not necessarily the harvesting, but the studies on bioluminescence in general, which can categorize and create an imaging platform. So essentially that's what I'm going to segue into right now. Is the case study that I did was on this website +1, which explained basically how the NFKB signaling is a major process of human breast cancer. It just occurs molecularly, and they studied the plant-derived natural compounds that essentially can be harvested, and they interfere with the NFKB signaling to provide treatment for cancer. So what they did was they studied how bioluminescence can reveal the specific dosage of those different plant-derived natural compounds, and once it reveals the dosage that's necessary to kill off the NFKB molecule, it can decrease the spread and decrease the presence of cancer in general. The next slide, this is the graph that I got from the case study, and it's a little bit hard to read, but it basically just shows the different ratios on the multicolored system that they created and the presence of celestrol. So I'm going to explain what that is in a minute. So the graph as overall shows the effects of plant-derived natural compounds, which is the celestrol down here. So it shows the concentration of that. And then it shows how that concentration targets the NFKB signaling and essentially stops, depending on the dosage, stops the spread or can kill off the cancer cells. So essentially the process of bioluminescence has allowed for the creation of a triple-colored bioluminescent reporter cell system, which is shown here by this graph, the 1, 2, 3. That's the system which aids in identifying the molecular reaction of the plant compounds on the NFKB signaling molecule, which is the one that inhibits the cancer cells to grow. So then what they found is on a dose-dependent basis, it allows the limitation through biomechanics of the presence and spread of cancer cells. So the main takeaway of my presentation is there's a lot to be known about bioluminescence in general and the organisms that obtain it. And so I hope that you can kind of understand how bioluminescence works through that chemical reaction and the substrate and the enzyme working together to create that glow. Why it helps, you can see how it helps specifically the bioluminescent plankton to survive through their defense mechanisms. and it helps the medical field and the scientific field to benefit through cancer research and creating medical and biomedical advancements. I identified a specific type of dinoflagellate, and overall I think that's an amazing thing to witness. You saw how the waves were literally glowing, and I think that's pretty incredible. I've always kind of wondered that natural mystery of Earth, and so I think that was a pretty cool thing to study, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you.